standing history that has brought us to reside here and to seek to know our place within that history. Meg Witch, and carry on.
Good morning. Our first guest today hardly needs an introduction. She is a woman of courage, strength, and determination that many of us supported and all of us voted for. And in a more perfect world, she might have become an English teacher. But fate always steps in with other plans. She married her high school sweetheart, a patriotic young man who answered the call of country, joined the Marines, and was deployed to the Middle East. And like all deployed combat veterans ever, came back a casualty. The toughest job in America falls to those this country puts in harm's way. The second toughest falls to the wives, the husbands, the partners, and the families they leave behind. And perhaps far more often than acceptable, those they return to. While raising two small children, she became a lawyer. Tired of the empty, endless, broken promises, the empty lip service, the complete lack of accountability, of commitments made and not honored in helping our veterans reacquaint themselves into a peacetime setting. She has been a champion advocating for active military, veterans, and military families like her own ever since. And just this week, the Veterans Administration announced plans to eliminate 70,000 jobs. With the guts of a Marine and in the true spirit of patriotism, she rose up and crossed swords with the empty suit Lieutenant General. And that might have been the closest he ever came to actual conflict in his entire career. Northern Michigan is extremely fortunate to have her on our side, as we have been so proud to stand by hers. Please welcome Callie Barr.
Wow, thank you, John, for that introduction. Very much. I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. Keep the faith. You know, we heard a lot in the last election that we aren't going back. But what I want to tell you today is that we aren't going anywhere. And, you know, I'm here today because there's a threat that's far greater than the loss of any one congressional seat, and that's the loss of our democracy. You know, we're facing the dismantling of our federal government, our system of checks and balances, blatant disregard for our Constitution. And this has been, in some aspect, you know, cheered on by a post-industrial Midwest that's been and felt abandoned for far too long. And for a lot of us in our rural areas, we know this. You know, we have fought propaganda, misinformation, disinformation, defeatism, distrust in our government, and a lot of this perpetrated, right, by a billionaire class backed by a corporate machine. But we know what it means to fight. And the work that we do here is vital. And we're the key. You know, in our areas, our working people, our farmers, our unions, we're the key to fighting back against the consolidation of power that we're seeing that threatens this over 249-year-old experiment that was meant to safeguard our lives, our liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And this is not an overreaction. It's like we're sitting in a house that's filling with smoke, and we have a lot of people telling us to breathe out the windows. Enough. Now is the time to say fire and to go put it out. You know, we have lost federal workers who protect our veterans. John just pointed out about 83,000 more employees from the VA are likely to be fired. Our protection for our forests, our Great Lakes, our food safety, research, medicine, our national security, and futures for our children. And I know the headwinds are strong. I know what it feels like, especially as a candidate, to feel like you just screaming in the wind sometimes for resources or to have a voice in this. But I want to be really clear that we only lose what we concede. And we refuse here to give up on our neighbors, on our homes, and on our communities. And we have a role to play in this fight ahead. And now is not the time for measured silence and carefully orchestrated restraint. Now is the time for action. And if you aren't ready and if you aren't mad, you're not paying attention. And for many of you here, when I look at my screen and I see the folks on this Zoom call, many of you are in your golden years. And maybe you're tired and frustrated. And I know, but the thing is, like, the fight for freedom never waits for the most convenient time. You know, I'm sure none of you thought in my retirement, well, now it'll be a good time to fight fascism. But you are needed. You are so needed. Even if you can't drive at night or your hand cramps after writing one letter, you can't hear as well or see as well as you're used to, this fight is going to take all of us. You know, Sojourner Truth was 54 years old when she said, "Ain't I a woman?" in her speech in 1851. Susan B. Anthony was in her 80s when she formed the International Women's Suffrage Alliance. And Benjamin Franklin was 70 years old when he signed the Declaration of Independence. And all our young people right now balancing jobs and kids, I know. But I also know fighting for a free future is more important than continuing to just struggle against a status quo. You know, I have two young daughters right now, and just this last week, my husband showed me an article where they're removing from the Pentagon pictures of women Marines who've served. You know, I have a daughter that wants to be a Marine like her dad. And the thing that I can guarantee them is that we will keep fighting for that future. And one of my daughters later, after we'd had a discussion about this, you know, she's a reader and a dreamer. She sent me a quote later in the day that said, "Never regret raising dragon slayers in a time when there are actual dragons." And that has stuck with me because there are times in life when we're called upon to be more than what we are and more than we could ever be alone. When we have a calling that's higher than self, that lifts us to a greater vision of humanity and human decency. And we have to remember that darkness retreats from even the smallest amount of light. And so we need to continue to give our time, our passion, our skills, our love to something that's bigger than us. You know, Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice." And we don't know how long that will be. But what we do know is that we'll resist the man who crowned himself king in place of the man, George Washington, who gave the entire world hope because he would not be a king. And so we will teach our children and our children's children what it means to be an American patriot, where we know that we're not great despite our differences, but because of them. We know what it means to fight for the weak, that our kindness is not a weakness, to stand up for justice, to keep our promises, to protect our allies, and to speak truth to power and to lies. And so we keep organizing. We keep having these meetings here, attending rallies, writing letters, perhaps talking to an empty chair and holding our representatives accountable. And I'll tell you what, we're going to be fierce and uncompromising in a resistance because this resistance is founded on hope and on the love of a country that always promised it was for we, the people. So just take care and keep the faith. And thank you. Thank you for letting me be here with you today.
Thank you so much, Callie. We just, I think you can see all the people applauding in their pictures, and you're such a force, and we will do everything we can to help you in the future. I hope you know that.